Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. I would like just to give you a few brief logistics information on how to participate to the Q&A sessions that we will have towards the end of this panel. So by now, I hope you have downloaded the EDD app, under which you have session Q&A. You are encouraged to send your questions through this application. Please make sure that you select the right auditorium. This is auditorium A2. So you're encouraged to send questions towards, during the panel, and then we will ask these questions to the panelists towards the end. Thank you very much. And then now I leave the floor to Commissioner Vella. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paola, and welcome to everyone. Welcome to the European Development Days high-level panel. And today and during this session, we will be discussing the circular economy. We will be looking at the circular economy as a global development model, a new economic model moving away from a linear to a circular economy. We are looking at the circular economy as a word mover to a sustainable consumption and production. Today, everyone is talking about the green economy, about the circular economy, about the sustainable consumption and production, about the triage, different name, but at the end, the same objective, a resource-efficient economy. And with regards to the circular economy and in line with Sustainable Development Goal number 12, I have to say that the European Union is very much committed to this transformation, and we are committed both domestically as well as externally. Last December, the European Union will have adopted our circular economy package consisting of a legislative framework for waste and waste management, as well as an action plan to close the loop straight from the design, production stage, right down to the usage and recycling stage as well. I said in line with the Sustainable Development Goal, and I don't need to tell anyone that this is the 2030 agenda, which is offering, first of all, a challenge and also a great opportunity. And the success of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals depends a lot on cooperation and depends a lot on partnership, but mostly it will depend a lot on the implementation commitment, not just by the European Union, but it's a global commitment, so implementation will have to be on a global level as well. And with this in mind, so I would like to turn to today's business, and I would like to first welcome our guests, and I would like you to welcome, please, Mr. Mebrahtu Meles, who is the State Minister for Industry in the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Mr. Herman Erdman, who is the CEO of Redisa, which is a very successful tire recycling company from South Africa. Ms. Chloe Simea, who is Head of Public Affairs at Swaits Environment. I think Swaits needs no introduction. And last but not least, Mr. Ruben Baumer, who is an engineer and one of the founders of Synergy, which is a business selling small solar systems in rural Senegal. He is also one of our young entrepreneurs, young leaders at the European Development Days. So before we dive straight into the panel session, just a few words about the circular economy. As I said, the European Union has adopted our circular economy package in December. And what is our vision? Our vision is to go for a resource-efficient economy. We do have a resource deficit in the European Union. We import some 6 times more raw material and resources than we we produce. As I said, partly it's a legislative framework and partly it is an action plan to close the loop. Before we go, I would like to announce a video about circular economy. So if we can play the video, please.
In nature, everything is upcycled. Plants absorb light. Leaves grow. Soil is enriched. Seeds sprout, ready for the cycle to start again. There is no waste. Everything is reused. In fact, waste as we know it comes from just one species, us. But maybe not for long. The circular economy ends our reliance on the rubbish heap and turns waste into a resource. Sustainability is designed into products, remaining valuable until the end, when they can be introduced back into the production cycle. One industry's waste becomes another's raw material. The EU is already on its way to the circular economy through eco-design, waste prevention, and the reuse and recycling of products. Businesses across Europe are making our society and environment more resilient. In the coming years, they could go on to save billions of euros, create jobs, and greatly reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you very much. So I spoke about the circular economy. I spoke a little bit what the European Union is doing about it, but today's issue is not the European Union and the circular economy. We said it's a global model, and it's all about a global transition, and we need partners globally, and we need to involve all sectors globally. We are looking at an economic model which regards waste more as an asset than as a liability. So I will turn straight to our panel, and I would like to turn to Mr. Meles. Mr. Meles, in your country, do you see as an opportunity the circular economy within a sustainable economic growth? And in your experience, how are developing countries looking at the circular economy as a concept for economic development? And perhaps you could also start by explaining a little bit to us the economic model that you use in your country. No, it's automatically on. You can speak.
Hello?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can speak.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for having us here also to talk on this great day, EDD. In fact, we are very much honored to listen also. EDD is committed, for the Sustainable Development Goal in this 10th edition. Coming back to the question, in fact, my country, Ethiopia, has put a long-term strategy, on environment. As a country, we are aspiring to become a middle-income country by 2025. And in that vision, we have also included what we call CRGE, Climate Resilient Green Economy. So we have an environment policy. Of course, most of the energy that we want to produce is renewable energy. We are doing great in this regard in all type of renewable energy. The issue of circular economy for us, it is very important. Of course, for Ethiopia and other developing countries, what I say, this is the advantage of latecomers, We generate not very much waste in Africa and so on. Therefore, using the challenges of what other countries are facing, we are going to address, while the economy is produced much, of course, wastes will accordingly also will be generated. And wastes today, they are wells, they call it wastes are wells, you know. So this is very important for every African countries, you know, to put in their long-term plans. And in Ethiopia, talking about our business model, as I said, we have a policy already in place, and we have a Ministry of Environment. We have programs already designed and under implementation. So in going forward, especially with industrialization, which is considered the most polluter industry, we are having, you know, an industrial parks, and in these parks we want to have industries to be environmental friendly, no? So from generating of wastes to treat it fully within and recycle it so that nothing, with zero discharge, it means, you know, nothing is going out. In this case, we have, for example, the integrated agro-industry park that we are doing with UNIDO, and the country is divided according to the resource into 17 corridors, out of which now we are going to start implementation in 4 of the pilot, and Ethiopia is a pilot also for UNIDO for the post-MDG, what we call it, Sustainable Development Goal, as goal number 9. Therefore, in the upcoming industrialization, we are not going to follow fragmented industry everywhere, but rather through the industrial park approach, where anything cannot be discharged outside of that. And of course, outside of the industrial park, in agriculture, in service, we have to implement also our strategy of this environment as well. So if I get the point correct, this is a must. It is not a matter of choice for us. Of course, wastes are also wells. They can generate massive job opportunity. They can be also an opportunity for industry to come to process. And in this regard, we are promoting also for private sector to come into the recycling industries. I thank you.
Very well. So we all understand the waste generation that you have, the environmental policy that you have, the programs which are designed but need to move into implementation, your approach towards an industrial park system, and the move to green jobs. And I think all this shows that there is a lot of progress and a lot of opportunities. And I think that our next speaker is someone who has exploited such opportunities. So I would like to turn to you, Herman. Rediza started as an NGO recycling tires, and it has recently been nominated in circular awards at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Perhaps you could also tell us a little bit more about that. And during its first year, Rediza created some 1,700 jobs and processed over 77,000 tons of tires. So my question to you, Herman, is how do you manage to create this business? And in the creation of this business, what were the barriers that you had to overcome? What were the barriers that you encountered, and how have you overcome them?
Well, thanks very much for having me here. Rediza was actually a program which was implemented together with our Department of Environmental Affairs, and we are a non-profit company. And as such, we had a goal in order to establish a viable waste stream. So we started with tires because they seemed to be the easiest one to deal with in comparison to general waste, and we'll maybe touch on that just now. So what we did is we established medical aid for the environment, so a medical environmental insurance. Every producer and every importer of tires in South Africa pays this policy every month on a kilogram basis. He puts in a return, and this money in a legislated environment is being spent in order to develop a viable recycling industry. In that process, by now, last month, for example, we dealt with more tires than we actually get into the market, because everybody puts in a return on tires to us on a monthly basis, so we know how many kilograms of tires we produce. and we know also how much we deal with in a recycling fashion. So we will finance all sorts of kind of projects in that. So if industry, for example, for mining tires, cannot produce and find it not viable to deal with the ultra-large mining tires, we have a big mining industry in South Africa, Redisa will fund that and will then hand it over to entrepreneurs, which then will run these businesses and deal with that. So what we established is that in order to establish a viable recycling industry and a circular industry in particular, we needed to create the pull in creating secondary industries, and we needed to create a flow of money so that the recycling industry and the secondary industry and the transportation industry could be funded. In the same process, we then, as we have now worked out to be successful, we then worked out is in South Africa we have a particular problem that 44% of our environment waste is not collected. So in our townships, in our rural areas, 44% of them, no waste collection takes place. So what we are now planning to do is to use the same kind of model to the packaging industry, to the other industries as of the waste goes in, charge them and use that money to pay people to clean up the townships and do the waste collection by paying waste pickers direct. So we established with Redisa a system in which we have ability, if you are a waste picker, you have a little card, which is a banking account. We pay, you do all your actions at collection points and delivery points with your card. They read your card and automatically we pay twice a week. Understanding how waste pickers operate, we're making sure that they get twice a week that money. So what we have learned in that is a number of things. The first one is that you need to place the money at the bottom, so in the hands of the waste pickers, that you need to go in and make sure that the industry as a whole participates in this, and that you have a proper plan how you will deal with that sustainably. So we have a plan that within 5 years, we have in the tire industry established a waste plan which is fully functioning, deals with all the waste in all waste tires. And when we then shift, as we have that, then there's a goal set by government that we're not using tires as a fuel, that we then go in and shift tires away. Some of this, at this moment in time, gets used as a fuel, and then gets shifted into crumbing and other things via creating secondary industry. So it has been very interesting for us as an experience to actually practically implement a circular economy.
Herman, you mentioned that this is a waste plan.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's a profitable company. At the same time, you planned this in conjunction with your environmental affairs department. So does that mean that the environment and the economic aspect of this waste plan are moving together?
Yes, I actually, we learned in this is that environmental benefits is a side effect. So in order to judge us, we took in McKinsey and we asked them, test our project and see what impact do we have as to GDP. So is the project in actual fact positive to GDP? And the outcome of that is that within 7 years, we are not net positive to GDP by developing this industry. So it is really that what we have been preaching in terms of circular economy. We are saying that there is no reason for industry to fear this because it actually makes money for everybody participating. The other very important aspect which we learned is that you should be spending 5% of the money you're collecting in terms of research and development. So we're working with the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. We're building a product testing institute, and we do environmental rating, in this case on tires, and on all projects which we are dealing with. So any waste, producing industry, that we give them an environmental rating. And depending on the environmental rating is how much their fee will be. So the better your rating, the least you pay. The worse your rating, the more you pay. And also keeping in mind that we're actually wanting to create an environment eventually where you might say, well, if your environmental rating isn't at least 2, well, then you can't sell in our country your product, kind of situation. So that's where we are trying to go.
And do you see that this economic and environmental model could be a model which is used and repeated and copied in other sectors as well?
Absolutely. It lends itself to any kind of waste stream. We got 29 different waste streams in South Africa, and I think there comes more and more realization that this is the ideal model to fast-track the implementation of dealing with waste.
Very good. Thank you very much, Herman. And I think this shows the typical environmental and economic leadership that the circular economy is all about. And talking about leadership, Thwaites Environment is also one of the leading companies when it comes to the circular economy. So I would like to turn to Chloe as well to tell us a little bit about the history, which I believe dates back to some 1858, where the company has had a long association with international development, and it was actually the company which financed the project which linked the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean. But my first question to you, Chloe, is that we are talking here about a resource revolution, as it were, and Thwaites didn't wait for any legislation coming out of the European Union. They saw an opportunity, they saw a profitable opportunity, they saw that they could contribute to our environmental objectives. So again, can you talk us through about this resource revolution from your perspective?
Sure. Well, thanks for the introduction. Yes, I mean, Suez dates back for 150 years, so quite a long history of mostly managing water and waste. And I mean, we've been part in the 19th century of the industrial and hygiene revolution. At that time, the issue was about managing waste, taking waste and wastewater out of the cities, providing drinking water and providing enough water for the industry to grow within OECD countries. So that was the first very big step about water and waste management. In the 20th century, the issue was about comfort at home, and we developed drinking water to the tap and this kind of issues. And we are very much convinced that today the next revolution is about resources, the management of resources. This is due to the mega trends of urbanization, of course, population growth, of resource scarcity, of climate change. And we believe that water and waste management have a key role to play in all these challenges. And so, yes, we've been investing a lot into recycling, of course, which is one of the aspects of circular economy. Energy recovery is another one. Water reuse is also very important in some areas where there is a lot of water stress. And so we've turned from managing water and waste into producing renewable energy and renewable resources. And I mean, we're historically very much developed in the EU, with 2/3 of our activities in the European Union. But our activities in the developing and emerging countries is very much growing today. And this is because the challenges as regards water and waste management in developing and emerging countries are huge. We expect that by 2025, the amount of waste, the waste volumes will triple. We also expect that 70% of these volumes will come from emerging countries in 2025. And so the challenge is huge. And I'm talking about challenge because waste management, I mean, is very important in terms of health and environmental impacts. Health impacts are huge. The first aspect is of course, the negative impacts of badly managed dump sites. I mean, today, 80% of the waste in emerging countries are going to dump sites and non-managed dump sites, so that's a very important issue. And so it is mostly an issue for the waste pickers, but also for the whole population that lives around these dump sites. Then it's a big issue in terms of GHG emissions. We know that methane, which is the main gas that is produced from landfills, is 28 times more powerful than CO2 in terms of climate change. So it's very important. And last but not least, there is a big issue as regards plastics in the oceans. I mean, the latest report by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is very scary in that sense, which shows that by 2050 there will be more plastic than fish in the seas. And this often comes from poorly managed dump sites. So we very much believe that we need tailored solutions depending on the different situations in the different countries to move from illegal dump sites to what we call sanitary landfills, meaning that we manage the leachate and landfill gases, and to more and more energy recovery and material recovery. And we believe that in this regard, it's really key to work with stakeholders if we want to have long-lasting solutions in terms of circular economy in the emerging and developing countries. We need to work with the population living around these sites and the population working on these sites. And so I'm referring to waste pickers, and this is interesting because we both have an experience in this regard. Maybe just an example, we are, since 2014, managing the former dump site of Meknes in Morocco. And the city has asked us to rehabilitate the sites and to change it into a disposal and recovery facility. And through doing that, we've been working with the waste pickers on site to make sure that they keep their jobs, that we actually turn the site into added value for them. And so we've helped them to create a cooperative so that they can keep managing the waste and selling it to recyclers, thus creating value by themselves, but with healthier and more environmentally friendly working conditions.
You mentioned that you are active not only in the European Union, but I know that you are also active in a number of developing countries, developed countries. My question is, how different would your plans and how different would you approach the same objective but in different countries? How similar or how different?
Well, as I was saying, I think it's very important to have tailored approaches depending on the solution, on the situation that we find. I mean, in the EU, what we are currently investing into is state-of-the-art recycling facilities in order to close the loop. And I mean, we are a lot less confronted with the informal waste management, so this is completely different in terms of project management, in terms of stakeholder engagement. And in emerging countries, the solutions are totally different. I think we have to build, even more than in the OECD, we have to build long-term partnerships with the public authorities and with the stakeholders that are around. And it's really about moving slowly from currently ill-managed dump sites to sanitary landfills and then to recycling and recovery. It's very important to realize that before we jump into circular economy processes, well, the first very important, significant step is just to manage methane emissions on dump sites, because for dump sites that are not properly managed, you have just fires starting, and these liberate a lot of methane emissions and are very hazardous for the population. And so the first thing to do is just to cap and to recover the methane into energy. And that's already a huge step in terms of GHG mitigation and in terms of energy recovery. And then we can go into, for example, what we've done in Meknes in Morocco, into developing, let's say, composting facilities so that we divert bio-waste from the landfill and turn it into fertilizers for the agriculture. So it's about taking things step by step.
Very good. Thank you very much, Chloe. And so we know a little bit what the large businesses and the corporate businesses and the corporate CEOs think about the circular economy and the opportunities that they exploit. So what about the younger entrepreneurs, the younger business people, our younger generation, and those who have to start a business from a very small level? And our next speaker is exactly that, Mr. Ruben Bauer. You have been selected as the young leader, one of the young leaders in the context of the European Development Days, so congratulations, well done. And my questions for you are, what are your experiences as a young, emerging, and new entrepreneur? What actually motivated you to build a small business in a developing countries?
Thank you. So basically my motivation was that I was always interested in sustainability, environmental technology, but I also wanted to work in development because I was interested in development and social problems also. And I really wanted to contribute myself on the field, doing really something, and also within my field of expertise. And that's why I started a social enterprise in Senegal. And social enterprise or social business is in essentially combining NGOs, the strong points of them, with the strong points of commercial companies. It's addressing a social or an environmental problem with business models. So that's what we really believed in, that could be a new solution in the development cooperation field. And as we said, we just did it ourselves. I was with 4 other students, each with their own expertise, lawyer or financial education. I'm an engineer for formation. And after we started with the field study to see what the potential was in the rural areas around Thiès, which is in Senegal. And we saw that the potential of solar kits was very huge. There was an opportunity, a business opportunity, to selling those small solar kits. Basically, 5 million people, or around 5 million people in Senegal have no access to electricity, and they mainly live in the rural areas. So we just started after the field trial, very small. We bought some 30 kits only, and we did some demonstrations in the villages by night, so to show the people what light can bring, what solar energy can bring to them. Charging a phone, because the kit is not only for lamps, it's also for charging a phone, which is essentially business in Senegal or in Africa, having a charged phone. And the third thing was also that they could have a radio. And we just saw the enthusiasm of the people, and we went on that idea to exploit it more. And essentially, from the first beginning, we choose to only buy high-quality products, very, very high-quality products, to make it concrete, like a lithium iron phosphate battery inside, which was more expensive, but will last far more longer than the, at that time, popular lead-acid batteries, which will break far faster. Because we wanted to deliver quality to the people and make it long-lasting, because if you're a company, you have to sell something, and it must be a good service, because people have to buy it. It's not a donor program where they get it for free. We really have to deliver the quality and services that they need to get trust in us also. And one other issue was access to finance for the rural people, because the income that they have was too low to buy it directly, a solar kit. So solar kit costs around 200, 350 dollars or euros, and it's essentially a very small one. It's like your tablet, that you have an idea how big it is. It's not a huge system like we know it in Europe. But to have overcome the financial barrier, what we introduced was a partnership with a microfinance institute locally in TS, was the first step. And recently we also started a trial with the mobile money, which is very popular in Eastern Africa, but not yet so much in Western Africa. So we try to introduce that kind of financing too, so that people can pay with their mobile phone. If they have no bank account, they still can use their phone to have access to finance. So that were some essential points which we addressed and choices we made from the first beginning, because we saw in our field trial that it was the main barriers to overcome. And one other thing was that in Eastern Africa, there are a lot of companies acting on rural electrification. But what we saw was that it was quite limited in Senegal, and that's also one of the reasons we started there. At the moment, we have now a local manager working on it. She's a woman, for your information, and 2 technicians. And we sell around, I think this year it will be around 100 solar kits, and in one family is around 10 persons. So that gives you an image of the impact that it has. And we only started very small. I could realize that. Limited funds, like Commissioner told us. We started very small, but we're now thinking of raising money and expanding our business, because we see essentially that the business model is good and that it's working. So that's the actual situation of my project and my small business in Senegal. And we also think in the longer future to assemble them locally, because now it's imported, the solar products, and we want to assemble the whole kit locally if we have a certain scale. And I just want to add now 3 small points to the debate here with the other panel. I'm also working as a research engineer, so that's one thing, and also my experience as a social entrepreneur, which I think are essential to evolve to the circular economy. And the first one is that we should promote and support more the social entrepreneurs, the social businesses in developing and in developed countries. There is actually no framework for it to support it, because there is a gap between the commercial companies and the NGOs, and we fall just in between. But a lot of social entrepreneurs are active in the field of circular economy, but also addressing social problems of health, for example. And to give you a few examples of Senegal from my own experience, the first one is legally we were not allowed to make a company with a constitution that said we were a not-for-profit company. We had to make profit or to be an NGO which cannot sell products. And a second example is we couldn't get tax exemptions for the import taxes because we were a commercial company of that. And other NGOs, they just get exemptions, and the price is then much lower to import the solar kits inside Senegal. So the first point is really that we have to make sure that these are more supported also with access to finance, because you're not a company that can raise a lot of money, that has the financial possibilities to make a lot of dividends, etc. And you're also not an NGO who can apply for funds. So you're always a bit in between. So that's something I want to propose in your countries, in all of you, if you return, to think of that. And a second point I want to raise is we should think about knowledge creation in developing countries. And what I mean is actually the circular economy is a very high knowledge-intensive technology industry. And at the moment, a lot of developing countries are exporting their resources and importing technology. And the Western countries are focusing a lot on R&D, on innovation. We have the Horizon 2020 program from the European Union, which supports the innovation. We have companies like here, Suez, working very hard on new technologies. But at the moment that developing countries are not able to participate in this process of knowledge creation, then they will be one step behind again, and you will have the division between developed and developing countries again. One issue I wanted to address. So first, I think we need knowledge transfer, but in the long term, we need knowledge building, knowledge creation in developing countries, actually, I think they can do their own R&D perfectly if they have the funds, and they will come up with creative solutions which we, in our context, couldn't think of. But basically, the R&D happens in Europe, and the technology is exported, actually. And then one small third point, which I see from my experience as a research engineer, is I think that we should evolve from a value-added tax, which we all have and know now, to a more resource-added tax. So if resources are added, newly mined ones, non-renewable resources, of course, I'm not speaking of the other ones, it should be more expensive than the other ones with recycled ones. Actually, there is no business model if these ones are too cheap. A simple example is oil, and we are addressing that problem because of global warming. But also another resources they're not endless, and it will have a cost to don't have those resources in future anymore. For example, we cannot make solar panels if we don't have the resources to make it. So it will have a cost to have no resources anymore. And after that, if we evolve to such a tax, you can just let the economy do their thing. And being circular, recycling tires will be cheaper than making it with new mined resources. And then you have competition and economic growth, jobs, etc., what we all want to achieve in the circular economy. But we need to evolve to a more resource-added tax, otherwise there's no business model for it. That were basically my 3 points I wanted to add.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ruben. And I'm sure we all want to listen more about the resource-added tax idea. So we'll get back on that with you later. But now I would like to turn again to Minister Meles. You've heard and listened to a number of examples, projects that are ongoing. Do you think that any of these concepts, ideas, or projects could be transferred to your country in particular and to developing countries in general? And if yes, what would the government's role be in supporting such a transfer of these concepts into developing countries and in your country, for example?
Thank you again. Sure, these experiences, which was explained earlier by the young people, they are important in our country as well as in Africa. In fact, earlier, which we could not mention, and of course you raised also the issue of developing versus developed countries. With regard of circular economy, especially on two areas, agriculture and urbanization. In agriculture, we do find two types of waste, The first waste is on the post-harvest losses, which in agricultural production, it happens. And these are due to lack of post-harvest, infrastructures, like warehouses and proper handling mechanism and so on. They are at times huge, to the extent of 60%, they reach, especially in fruits, vegetables, and so on. Therefore, we need to conserve this all in order to efficiently utilize, the resources. So in this regard, we need to address this part of agriculture. And again, this is also an area for investment, an area for investment by the private as well as by the public, The second type of waste is agricultural resource, Agriculture is the most resource, generating. Again, here, as it was mentioned, can be used for energy. Of course, through biogas. In some countries, including my country, they are using it for household purpose to generate energy. But in a larger scale, this can be used also for a mobility purpose, even for transportation, for agricultural, plowing, and so on. In Brazil, they use this. And my sister, what she mentioned about this gas, methane gas, could be sources of energy for the agriculture production. Coming back in the urbanization, there are different types of wastes by each household. As urbanization is peaking in Africa, and of course with migration and with other factors, I think there are wastes generated, and most of the challenges here is starting from the collection and bringing it to the recycling sector. In here, there are challenges. One is the awareness of the people itself. Second is the infrastructure itself, the networking, and of course the funding issue is there, and the incentive by the government also. So this needs to be addressed. So in this regard, as you mentioned, there are a lot to learn from European countries, so that these wastes can be collected through collectors by generating job also, and then bringing to a collection centers with our infrastructure, and then recycling it properly. Therefore, urbanization, peaking, this could be another area to focus. In my country, in Addis Ababa, we collect garbage from the centers, through the municipality, and they use it, for energy now. There is a big project in Addis Ababa, it's under completion, to generate electricity with the support of the French government. This model, we look forward to expand it to many urban centers in the country. Therefore, when we talk of waste, there are many types, especially efficient utilization of the agricultural resources, a top priority, for people in Africa, as people are very poor, Secondly, those agricultural waste can be again utilized back into the economic sector, so that they can generate. Of course, our young engineer, he mentioned a lot about solar energy, and most of Africa, in fact, below 50%, they are living in dark, So there are huge opportunity also in this regard. So a combination of all the governments and developmental partners, including the financiers, especially in rural area, the microfinance, for sure, there is a role. Government has to be on the driving seat, no doubt. So in our case, now, with this integrated agro-industry park, it is a business model where it encompasses about 100-kilometer radius, and there are commodities select which can be used as input for industries. Therefore, there are stratas here, aggregation centers, where the products going to be aggregated through warehouses, and then it comes to the primary processing center, then finally to the final processing sectors. So the whole area could be an important intervention, starting from farmers, cooperatives, micro, small level, medium level enterprise, domestic investor, as well as international investors. Here comes the role of every partner, with financing, technology transferring, or packaging, you name it, post-harvest technology. Therefore, this model, we believe, based on value chain, could serve a model for other countries also, especially African countries, where agriculture and industry will be, feed to each other. The product from agriculture processed to the market, giving incentive to the farmers, as well as agriculture requires a lot of inputs, including, in fact, the fertilizer. Fertilizers can be organic fertilizers generated in the corridor and given back, to the agricultural sector, so that this forward-backward linkage within this could serve, as a springboard, to the growth of the overall economy. So in this regard, we are starting with UNIDO and other development partners to start in 4 corridors, in Ethiopia, because Ethiopia, as well as Africa, is agrarian country. We depend on agriculture, so what we can grow is out of our agriculture. So the agriculture and industry together can create the spiral growth, of the economy. So the next growth pole is, in my opinion, there in Africa, because Africa is least developed. So there is huge opportunity for everyone, including entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, private sectors, and even, large companies to come in and take in the industrial park activities. I thank you.
Thank you very much, and I am sure that circular economy concept is a concept which can find a lot of applications in the agricultural sector as well. Herman, we're talking about different businesses, different business models, the same circular economy concept. Probably you face, all of you, similar challenges, and very often, without even knowing, you come up with similar solutions. What I'm aiming at, my question is, would you see a platform, a coordinating platform, a cluster, call it whatever you want, a circular economy cluster, a circular economy forum, so that all circular economy businesses can come together, they can compare notes, they can discuss their common challenges, they can compare best practices. Is there one such forum cluster? If not, would you see the need for such a forum?
Absolutely. I think there needs to be more the realization that ultimately the circular economy will replace the mining industry. So over the future, that is what's going to happen. So we need to start treating this industry with the amount of respect and legislative power in order to enable it to act like what is expected from it. What we have not done is we haven't gone in and taken it serious enough. We need to create an environment in which my investments, which I normally would do into a mine, I now would be doing into the recycling, into the circular economy. And we do this, we have yet not spoken about the ownership of waste, what we would be talking about it, and I think that is a very important part which is coming up. And the whole development of that industry is so replacing the mining industry by going in and creating an environment where number one is there is enough financial security by taking away the subsidies which we are at this moment in time allowing industry to take in terms of not paying for the extended producer responsibility. We seem to still believe that this part of the extended producer responsibility when we pay it is some sort of tax or some sort of fee which is now a form of subsidization. In actual fact, the opposite is the case. The reality is if this fee isn't paid, then there is a subsidization by municipalities, by government at large, which pays for getting rid of this waste and and dealing with this in an appropriate manner. So by going in and creating, through legislated environment, a financial security, by dealing with the problem of ownership of wastes, by going and organizing this as an acceptable industry at large and spending more money, at least 5% of all the funds, together with our universities in the different countries, on research and development, that will guarantee us that we are creating an industry which by himself will be larger than the existing mining industry. So yes, you need to have that body to be organized properly in forums like that to make it clear, even to the industry players. I don't think that they yet see it as big enough as what they really should be doing.
That's very good. And I saw Chloe and I saw Ruben nodding. So if you want to add to perhaps Herman's. But I would like to ask one question, and you can also come on this, Chloe. You mentioned during your first intervention the importance that you give to your stakeholders, whether they are the population, civil society, your, I don't know, support services and so on. But I would imagine that your staff is also one of your major stakeholders. How do you engage your staff into believing in this circular economy concept, and how easy or how difficult is it?
Well, I think we're quite special because, first of all, I think pretty much all my staffers, which we have within Redisa, is there because they wanted to be there. So they actually asked to work for us. So that was the first one. I think if I maybe can step a little bit back to talk about staffers. We have a historical problem. We have two major problems. One of them is the social economic problem which we have in the world, which is the rich get richer, poor get poorer kind of situation. And on the other side, we have an environmental problem into that. And what we have allowed to do is that we are sort of believed that, well, on the one side, the people on both of those industries and those problems, people should be working for nothing. So we came in as, on the one side, we have the Mother Teresa kind of syndrome where everybody, charity is only when you don't get paid for it. And on the other side is you have to be a bunny hugger to do that. We don't believe that. So within our organization, we're saying that this is one of the biggest problems we possibly have in society today. The development of a circular economy is actually an economic solution. And the environmental side is a side effect of that. Is economically, it will create growth, it creates jobs. I was earlier talking about the waste, 44% of not waste collection. So if we do that, we reckon we will create about 50,000 jobs in that, over 1,000 new companies into that. So there's an enormous potential in terms of business development by creating the circular economy. And really what this is about is to get ourselves as human beings linked into the biosphere of the earth. Into that. That's what we were, and there's a whole industry around that. So my staff is all passionate about that, but we call it reducerized. So we have reducerized them into that. So we made a condition that you had to believe in social welfare and you had to believe in the right environmental goals in order to work for us. A bit like you can't work for the Catholic Church if you're not Catholic, kind of thing. So, so here we are. So yes, the staff absolutely very important, and the passion you will see if people come to our office. You see that passion.
Very good. Chloe, I saw you nodding. Perhaps you want to add something to what Herman was saying in the sense, is the circular economy business talking to each other? Are they comparing notes? Are they comparing best practices? Are they discussing their common challenges and issues? If not, should something be done about it?
So many things to talk about from
go ahead, feel
everyone's
free.
interventions.
Don't just
Okay.
answer my questions. Feel
No,
free.
but I'll answer your question first. Yes, definitely. There is a need for talking with each other to find solutions. We are already doing that. We are discussing with other waste management actors and with recyclers in particular. We are also talking with the industry, and I think this is key. At Suez, we've started a coalition of industries all along the value chain in order to build common messages. This is very important in our view because the industry is the actor that needs to use the recycled products that we make, that we recover from waste. And today is just not really properly working yet. The loop is not completely closed. And if we want to do that, we need to engage in more partnerships, in long-term partnerships, in order to understand better the quality requirements they have, their own constraints, and also for them to have more confidence in our recycled products. So that's a very important thing, and within Suez we're building joint ventures with the industry. We've built one with the Renault on the end-of-life vehicles. We've built one with Nexans on recycling cables, and I think this is very important. And it's important because it's very important to support the recycling industry. As Herman was saying, today one of the biggest challenges we have is that we're just not making money out of recycling. I mean, I'm lucky to work for a big company that has the resources to invest in a sector that currently loses money, which is the recycling sector. And we are losing money in the recycling sector because the price of secondary raw materials is currently higher than the price of virgin materials. And you've been talking about it. It's notably because of the dropping of the price of oil and other commodities. And so we're in a situation where it's more expensive to recycle than to use virgin materials. This is a real problem, and this is where we do need the institutions to take the lead and send signals to the market so that we can shift towards a circular economy. And that's why I want to comment on the last point, which is about staff engagement. This is key, but it's not complicated at all. As Herman was saying, within our companies, we just have very committed and very much engaged people. Everyone is happy to work on circular economy issues. Yeah. And what I just want to say about this is that circular economy is such a positive narrative. And I think the EU needs a positive narrative. The young people need a positive narrative. And I think it's very important to invest into this positive narrative and to stop looking at all the crises we have around, which are numerous, of course. And in this regard, it's great that circular economy is on top of the Commission's agenda. But I think we still can do more and build on this political agenda that is the circular economy, and that will bring us to a new vision of the EU.
Yes, very good. Ruben, you had a dream, you had an idea, and with your enthusiasm and with your motivation, you transformed that idea into reality, a new business, a new economic model in a new country. Has your motivation after you started increased or decreased after moving from paper to practice? And in brief, if it's increased or decreased, what were the main causes? Or at times you must have felt more motivated, at times you have to climb concrete walls so you feel demotivated. Your experience.
It's a good question. In general, it's getting up and up and up, but we should say it's probably there is a real difficult thing for young people to be an entrepreneur. And I'm speaking first of Europe. Being entrepreneur, being social entrepreneur, or just being trusted as a young people, because I don't have the experience of the people here sitting, but I do have a voice and an opinion, and to be trusted, and not only trusted that I can sit and say something, but also that we can really contribute, for example, to get access to finance unless we're younger, and don't get the comment of you have no business experience doing that, so you don't get funding. So we really have, and now speaking about the Young Leaders Program, I met some very strong young leaders which struggle with the same things as me in Europe, which is that they have the ideas, they want to work on it, they're highly motivated, really highly motivated, but we have a lot of barriers to overcome if it comes to entrepreneurship in all these countries as young people. And I want to address that it is quite important to not only say that we can have a voice or be the leaders of the future, but that we also are able to contribute actively to economy or even other sectors too.
Very good. I'm not going to forget to ask you about your resource added tax idea. Is this something that you have raised with authorities, that you have discussed outside the EU or in the EU? And what are your thoughts about this?
To be honest, I didn't actually discuss it a lot. I was looking into it because I just felt the need for it. And I think we also had a discussion and it's addressing the same problem of we must have a business model. So that is the mainly thing we should evolve to. But if I'm looking into that, into the study work that is done, I'm not only speaking of Europe, but internationally, the studies on that topic are so limited. And the implementation will be, I don't have a finished plan for an implementation of that. But we should work on it to do the study work of what is possible, because the concept behind is quite logic and quite good, in my opinion. So we should evolve to that, address it properly, and then we can have a look how to implement it. And let me just ask one thing also, or address one problem, is that where will we have that tax? Because what we now say, we have a producer responsibility. Where are the goods produced? I'm not only speaking about China, but we produce it in certain countries, finished products. And there we will have the responsibility of that companies. On the other hand, we have a lot of developing countries exporting only resources. And if we're just putting a tax only on the final product, and there's nothing on the resources side, they will have a bigger problem than before. And I'm coming back to my knowledge creation. I'm now at the second point of my tax. We should address it properly, or the SDGs have a problem.
Very good. A lot of food for thought, and I think Herman wants to add something to that.
Yeah, I think the question here is the one side, there's a fee versus a tax here. On the one side, you can have a tax, which is really something government collects, and there's no specific payment you can, or action you can go and ask for that tax which you're paying in. The fee which you are placing in terms of covering your extended producer responsibility, like what we chose in Redisa to do, has allowed us to overcome some of the instabilities which the market creates when, for example, the raw materials becoming too cheap. So if your oil price drops and the plastic industry has created by himself a great industry in order to subsidize and make jeans out of old PT bottles, and they now in South Africa need 1,100 rand in order to, per ton, in order to survive. The dropping oil price has achieved that they're only achieving 700 rand per ton. A Redisa kind insurance policy will then cover that 400 rand, because as government, you can't afford to lose that industry. We can't permanently see that our recycling industry collapses. So we need to create a legislated environment in which that industry is stable and can operate. That's not a subsidy. Dealing with our waste is not a subsidy. It is an extended producer responsibility, which we have established in most of the countries in our laws. We just don't have, we in South Africa also didn't have the ability to collect that money and then take it to the right use. So I think it is also important that when you collect the fee then, that you're spending it right, so that you're making sure this industry can survive. And it is of vital importance that the companies which run the extended producer responsibility schemes, that they are not allowed to participate in that market, so that they're not using their position of power and knowledge in order to create uncompetitive environment. It is also important that we are paying, like in South Africa, we pay a credit to all the export goods which are exported. So, because if the tire doesn't come into South Africa, we don't need to be paid for that tire which is manufactured in South Africa in order to deal with it after its life end. So it's a very balanced, a highly balanced environment, and I think it is vital that I personally believe that we will not produce in 25 years anything which doesn't have an environmental rating. Like we have today, nothing with an electrical rating into that. So the environmental rating will be one of the tools government can implement in order to motivate manufacturers to make environmentally more friendly items. The second one is that I don't believe there will be anything produced without having some sort of environmental insurance to be paid for your extended producer responsibility, so that companies like yourself have a funding mechanism in actual fact to survive. We need to be recognizing that the recycling industry, like I said earlier on, will replace the mining industry. That's how big it is. The green industry is, and we already have that. I have a very classic example. In South Africa, we have the mining belt, and we had platinum mine strikes. There were 60% of all platinum produced in the world came out of that area, and there was a strike. Despite the fact that we had a strike, the prices of platinum did not go up. Why not? Because the recycling industry in platinum works well, and we're able to take off the lack of material which is theirs. So it's already influencing our life on an everyday basis. We might not recognize it. So the circular economy exists in certain markets. It just doesn't exist everywhere where we're wanting it to be. So we need to just take, I often see us, and for us it's maybe because we work in this every day and we do that, we have the practical experience. We're just using exactly the same business principles than those which we use for other businesses which were successful. And one of the problems has been is that we haven't used them. For example, in waste. In most of the waste which we have, we don't actually know how much waste we have. So in order to manage it, where did you ever manage an industry where you didn't know what your numbers are? I mean, I can't. I'm an entrepreneur. The first thing I want to know is, what are my numbers are? So that's the first thing. When you really have a big problem, what do? Well, I hire the best people I possibly can do it. I don't find somebody which works for nothing. in that. And so is when we use for the circular economy and for the waste and the environmental problems, the same business principles we use for all the successful businesses, you will see is that it actually functions.
Very, very good. Well, thank you very much for this first part, and I think you did very well. You created, and you gave us a lot of feedback. The model being applied in different sectors, your different experiences, different products in different countries, your difficulties and the support that you found. And talking of support, I mentioned earlier on that the European Union is committed internally, domestically, and also externally. And externally, we have a program which is called Switch to Green. And this program is all about the European Union's international cooperation on the green economy. This is one such program. There is another program which is called PAGE, which is we are supporting the United Nations Partnership for Action on the Green Economy. And in this respect, we have another video which I would like our technicians to play.
The green economy is one that respects the environment, generates growth, creates jobs, and helps reduce poverty, based on sustainable consumption and production, cleaner technologies, energy and resource efficiency, eco-innovation, and the sustainable use of natural resources. The green economy can serve as a great solution to the problems we all face, such as stagnating economies, unemployment, climate change, or the loss of biodiversity. We need businesses to produce renewable energy, develop cleaner transports, design innovative technologies, and produce food sustainably, to allow a planet of 9 billion people to enjoy a decent life without destroying the Earth. A broad variety of new economic sectors are emerging around green practices. Green economy businesses create wealth, but the wealth needs to be shared out, like paying people a decent wage, or else the whole system falls apart. Green economy is not just about economic growth. It's also about people, creating new jobs, green jobs, improving the livelihoods of those who depend on natural resources, and reduced exposure to pollution. These are many reasons why the European Union is helping its partner countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and other parts of the world to better value their natural capital and use it to build a green economy that helps the people, the economy, and also the environment. Like here in Pakistan, the European Union is helping to make the cotton industry greener. Cotton is a really important sector for the Pakistani economy, but it's also one of the dirtiest. Lots of pesticide and fertilizers, a huge waste of water. But now farmers are learning to work with the environment. Their profits have grown, and the people working in the fields aren't exposed to harmful chemicals. It's a win-win for everyone. Or here, in Sri Lankan tourist resorts. Hotel kitchens used to throw out leftovers and unused food, making a lot of waste that had to be taken away. And you pay to get it taken away. Now, food waste is turned into biogas that's used to cook the food, just like ordinary gas. So they're actually cutting their costs. It's a big project, 350 hotels. That's a big impact on the environment and the economy. Both of these examples are from the EU's Switch Asia programme. Over €250 million, 80 green economy projects. Cleaner, safer jobs for hundreds, maybe thousands of people. That's families who can afford to send their children to school, and huge environmental benefits for countries like Sri Lanka. These are just a few examples from the EU Switch to Green programme, which also supports the green economy worldwide.
Very good, and obviously that is one program, one element of a wider scheme of EU support. And just to mention that the EU has allocated some 550 million euros for the green cooperation Green Economic Cooperation under its Development Cooperation Instrument for 2014-2020. So now we pass on to the second part of our discussion, and this is based on a question and answer. If you have any questions for the panel, if you have sent using the application, any questions. So I would ask Paola to tell us what the questions were.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have received a few questions. I will just read them. I think the first one is an open question for any one of you. We want to know what you think, if you think that we could require industries to restrain from using non-recyclable products in their supply chain. So we've been talking about the legislation. So, Mr. Herman?
Absolutely. However, I do believe is that industry needs to be incentivized to do that. So I don't think that the stick approach is going to be working here. So if we're making it through an environmental rating in such a way as that it is more profitable for companies to produce and use more environmentally friendly products. If we are spending money on R&D, because I think it's that most of the companies would love to go in and save money and don't do the environmental things maybe in a certain way. If we, for example, take the leather industry, they become past dependent. So what that means is you BMW can produce today leather in their motor cars, in their electrical car range, in which they don't use any chemicals at all. So they're producing that.
We provide much focus to light manufacturing industry, industries that are labor intensive, as well as relatively less in capital and technology, and of course uses agricultural raw materials. Therefore, agro-processing, textile and garment, leather and leather products are the top priority of our economy on two fronts: to transform agriculture. Of course, transforming agriculture means transforming the livelihood of the small farmers, as well as to generate, these resources for industry processing, so that overall growth of the economy also will be addressed. Therefore, these are the areas. Of course, today we generate in volumes, the coffee, sesame, livestock, fruit and vegetable, and so on, leading in Africa. So we want also leading nation in light manufacturing in Africa by 2025. By going into this value addition aspect of this industry. Therefore, structural transformation from agriculture towards industry, center stage will be around this area.
Thank you. And then looking at the time, I think we have time for just a last question. It's directed at Ruben. In fact, I think you partially addressed it, but maybe you would want to elaborate on it. What was the biggest challenge you faced in your initiatives for the environment or in your business endeavor, I would say?
The biggest challenge is difficult because you always have, you learn while you're doing, and you always have problems, challenges, and then you try to solve them. But I think that the biggest challenge was the fact that we were young people. And that's one message I want to give you, that young people can be entrepreneurs because youth unemployment is very high in Belgium, in Europe, in developing countries. And if we want to activate that youth, we should have confidence in them. And that was one of the main challenges we had, I think.
Thank you. Then I'll pass it on to you for your closing remarks.
Very good. Thank you very much, Paula. Before I end, I would want 2 words to 2 questions. The first question being, if you want to create more awareness about the circular economy, what channels would you use? And I'm thinking dialogue, social media, use NGOs, better cooperation. I want one word for that. The second question is, what would be the most important element to support the transformation? And we could think about implementation, finance, enforcement, capacity building. But I'll give you some time to think. And in the meantime, I will give some closing remarks. First of all, to thank you, because I think it has been a very factual and an informative session, and I was struck by the comments made by Mr. Meles, and I think that there are some real opportunities in Ethiopia, considering the amount of waste which is being generated and which is in the initial stages maybe of being managed, and the big opportunities in the agriculture sector. Herman spoke about the impacts by Redisa from the circularity point of view in the tire industry, how this operation perhaps could be strengthened and enhanced, the need for industry to talk more to each other. Chloe is the perfect example of a determination of sustainable leaders when it comes to the private sector to drive this resource revolution forward. And Ruben, the perfect proof that we have young and motivated entrepreneurs out there who are really helping to make a real difference on the ground. People, youngsters who are looking at legislation, who are looking at opportunities from a new perspective, from outside the box that normally we end up. So thank you very much for all that. So 2 words for the questions that I put. Mr. Meles?
I think the issue is about partnership. So synergizing and optimizing resource, better coordination. And the second word will be robust action, because there is no time, Planet, people, urbanization, population, all these challenges, global challenges, they need better coordination and robust action. National capacity building, of course, along with that.
Thank you very much. Herman?
I think the first word would be education. I think there's a lack of education in terms of what circular economy is into that is. And the second of all, it's cooperation. Worldwide this isn't a country's problem, it's a worldwide problem, and we need to start learning to work together to fix it.
Thank you. Chloe?
The first keyword would be empowerment, empowerment of consumers and citizens. I think they are key in driving the change. And second one would be about partnerships, long-term, local partnerships.
Very good. Ruben?
The first one is young people and socialpreneurs, because they're most young people. And second one is the resource added tax, I think.
Very good. You keep on insisting on that. We'll keep supporting you, I think. So thanks you very much for your participation, your contribution, your information, and I hope that you continue your good work inspiring others with your leadership. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.